Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here today. So to change a little from the subject that you have heard in the last 2 days, we will speak a bit about AI, which is a pretty new thing. And the idea today will not be to present you the different solutions that we have about AI, but how it can impact the code quality that is generated by those solutions, and how to use it really efficiently to be sure that we get the full potential of those new solutions. So I like to start with this phrase. I think you may have heard this phrase before. It was in 2011 that Mark Andreessen said, "Software is eating the world." Why he said that? He said that because a lot of software were everywhere, and in some companies there is more and more software every day. And now, if we ask about ChatGPT what he thinks about the AI in software development, he will say that AI is eating the software right now. You can try it at home. Why I think it's true? It's because more and more code has been generated by AI every day. You see GitHub Copilot or some other tools like Codium, etc., generated more and more code. And the real question that we may ask is it a good thing or a bad thing for our work, but also for the quality of the software that we are building? And to introduce myself, so I'm Arthur Magne, I'm the CPO and co-founder of Pacmind. We work for, I think, 10 years about software quality, so we discussed a lot of things with a lot of different companies, and obviously, since the rise of the AI in software development, we spoke with a lot of large companies and also smallest one about the impact of these new tools in their day-to-day job. And since we are specialized in software quality, we are really interested in the impact of those new tools in the quality of the code that we are building and in the architecture, the security, etc. So to answer the question about will it be a good or a bad thing, we first need to understand how those new tools works. So the AI, firstly, will just capture a lot of data from the internet and from what is today available. So the first thing to understand is that those data can be outdated. So the AI is just on the models are absorbing the past data. So it can learn a lot of things on outdated things, on older version, etc. So firstly, I'd like to speak a little bit about Birgitta from Southwark, who said, AI mostly amplify what they see. So if AI learn on bad code and bad patterns about security, etc., they will amplify it. So you will see some bad patterns everywhere within your new code. And Birgitta is saying that they see a lot of half-baked public code or the bad code in your own code base, your legacy code, that you do not want to repeat. So the first thing to understand is that if the AI itself learns on this bad code, it will not make the difference between good or bad code. So you will see a lot of technical depth in the new code that you are writing. So it could lead to real issues within the company, because you don't want technical depth on your software. And if you see that on the new code you are building, this is a real issue. So the first question is really those AIs making us save money or time, or is it just hype and an illusion? Because since the last 2 days, we heard a lot of things about AI. We see a lot of people trying AI, so this is pretty new tools and stuff. But what are the current research on the subject, and what are the feedbacks of the company that have implemented AI since a few months or a few years? So if we take a look at GitHub Copilot, for example, if you take a look at the studies that they published, you will see that it's something that seems really awesome. And if you see that, you say, okay, this is a game changer, and I need to use it. So as a developer, as an individual contributor, I will feel maybe more productive, 88%, and I will have this impression that I'm going faster than before, and I won't let my manager to take it back from me. So as an individual contributor, this is really interesting. But if we look at some new studies, like this one from Uplevel, you can see a lot of different things about the software quality. In this study, there is more than 800 developers that participate, and in the group, they find that there are more than 41% of new bugs, more than the other group that are not using GitHub Copilot. So this is just one study on a few hundred developers. They don't say anything about the seniority of the developer. It could be really different if you are a junior developer using AI, or senior developer, or architect, etc. So this is just one study, but this is something interesting that illustrates that it could lead to some problems. And in the same studies that identify that AI is not really speeding up the development. It's really a small increase. If you take a look at a more global study, like the one from GitLear, you see that there is a huge amount of code churn that have been added during the last years. So since the rise of AI in 2022, you see that there is more than 100% of rise in code churn. So the code churn is when you write some code, and in a small time frame after, you edit it, you change it, etc. So it's generally a sign of bad code. And it's a sign that maybe you are not really gaining a lot of time. So it's really something that a lot of different studies are pushing and explaining to us, that you should be aware that maybe you will have some copy-paste code, like if you were copy-pasting from Stack Overflow like before. But in this case, it will be just added by GitHub Copilot or some other tool like this directly within your IDE. And I like this phrase from Adam Thornhill, who said that the main challenge with AI assistant programming is that it becomes so easy to generate a lot of code that shouldn't have been written in the first place. So for everyone, and even for non-developers, you can now create programs, you can now add a lot of code easily. And I don't know if really it's a good thing or a bad thing, because you know that you should have applications which are really small, and you need the simplest way of getting value from those applications. So the goal of the developers is not to create code, but it's to create value. And those tools really help us to create a lot of code. And the GitClear issue says that writing bad code faster implies considerable pain for the subsequent code reader. And that, I think, is the one that is the more important. It's the most important thing, because the code to write will be read 10 times more than it has been the time to create it from you. So if you write code faster and you have a lot of developers reading this code after in a code review and making a lot of comments, you won't gain time. And some studies that identify a lot of things on big companies raise those issues too. Accelerate, for example, is really the good one that you need to take a look at. There is a typo in the name, but it's generated by AI, so it's not my fault. That illustrates well what I am saying. So in this study of Accelerate in 2024, you see that as an individual level, so as an individual contributor, you will see a minor increase in the productivity. You will write code faster. It's a fact. You will have a minor increase in your job satisfaction, which is really important, and less burnout, which is also really important. But what this study identifies is also at the team level and the organization level. So you can have some local optimization, but in the global way, they identify that on the team operational performance, they have a substantial decrease. So as an individual developer, maybe you code faster, but it will take more time to review your code, to get more comments from code review. Maybe you will have more bugs, etc. So globally, for the team or the organization, they don't demonstrate real gain of using this AI. Obviously, those AI tools are evolving pretty fast, so we can obviously think that it will get better and better with the time. But right now, we find that we have not yet found the best way to use this tool and to get the best from them. And why they are not working that well within the company? You can see that the main issue with the behavior of the AI right now is that they learn from the past, they learn from the data stored in the internet, etc. But they have really a limited access to the context of the company. It's like you were a developer in a new company, you arrive in a team, and they just give you a ticket, a Jira ticket, and say, okay, you should write this part of the code. But you don't know where it will be deployed. You don't know what are the colleagues you are working with. Are they architects? Are they really junior developers, etc.? All of those things the AI can't access. For example, what are the practices about security that you have in your context? Are you working in a banking system, etc.? What are the practices about accessibility, performance, GDPR, test, etc., architecture? And the one that I think it could be really important is the level of the global team. If you are working with junior developer, you won't have exactly the same practices as if you are working with really senior developers. You will have maybe more advanced practices, etc. So the AI don't know this context, so it will just repeat the same thing that it has already seen. So there is another sentence from Birgitta which said, it's important to note that coding assistants should be paired with effective engineering practices that act as guardrails. Complex word. So the idea of this sentence is to say, you could use AI to fasten your development, but you need also to have some good practices, maybe about architecture, about hexagonal architecture, about test. Maybe if you are making a lot of code with TDD, it would be better to use AI because you will be sure that the code that you wrote will work because it's tested. If you don't have any test strategy, for example, it could be a real issue to use AI because you won't be able to really test how the system is working. So if we try to push some data to the AI for it to be able to understand our practices, how we can do that today? The first thing to do is maybe to plug this AI to our wiki, like Confluence, etc., so, or documentation that we have internally. But often, I think you still know that, this documentation is not up to date. So there is a lot of outdated things that you can have on Confluence, for example. But right now, it's not a big deal because no one is reading it. No one is going to this documentation and those old pages, etc., so it's not a big deal. But with AI, it could be a real pain because it will just review everything. And if you use a chatbot, for example, you will ask something about your documentation, and the AI will answer as if it's something that has been written just a few days ago. And maybe it's not the right thing to do. So a lot of things that have been hidden from you and you are not reading it will just pop out with this AI. So the key thing that we need to use to use this AI well is what we call human guidance. The idea is that really, as a human, with human intelligence and critical mind, and everything you know about the context of your company or your team, you should push it to the AI, and the AI will use that to generate code that follows your engineering practices, etc. So the other thing that could be really great about the AI in this context is that we think a lot about AI to generate code and to generate program, but as I discussed with a lot of people since 2 days, the real interesting thing is that the AI can help you to learn some new things, to get feedback on your code, to get a lot of things, to push practices across your organization, etc. So it could be a real thing to understand and to know about AI. It's not just here to generate code, but you can use it in many different ways. And spreading best practices across your organization is one of them. So since I think 4 years now, we created with Packmind a kind of process that have been pushed in many large organizations. It's quite an easy process, but the idea is, first of all, to create those best practices, like you maybe have already done with Confluence or some wiki pages, etc. But you need to explicit those practices. If you are not using AI, maybe with pair or mob programming, you can discuss as a team, and you can share those practices just by your voice. But if you are using AI, it will not be aware of those practices. So it's really important right now to store them somewhere and to be sure that they are up to date. So in this image, you can see 3 arms. It's because now you can, as technical leader or developer, create the practices you want, but the AI can also be there to suggest new practices for you, because it knows everything about everything that it's accessible on the web. It can also suggest you some new things about Java, about Spring, about performance, about security, etc., that you shouldn't know. So it's really good, and I will show you an example just after that, to use the AI to get feedback on your code. Then what is important is that you can't just create a practice and say, this is the only way of doing things, and spread it to your world team, because you won't have any friends in your team otherwise. It's good to discuss together and to be sure that the practice that you want to push is accepted by everyone and maybe challenged by some other developers who have another idea about, do you use Logbok, for example, or not? We see a lot of debate about that. Do you use this kind of architecture here, etc.? So everything that is related to specific practices that you can have, you should validate them with your team, or if you are a big company, with a community of practices. If you have community of practices about Java, for example, it could be great to validate at this level what kind of practices you should use. And then I will show you how the AI can help us control those practices. Like a Sonar, but a specific Sonar cube for your practices, you can now use AI to control what the code should look like. And we can also control tools like GitHub Copilot or Codium or some tools that generate code. So I will show you how you can push those practices, those development practices, to those tools to be sure that it's what you decided as practice that are used by those tools, and not something that just a GitHub Copilot picked randomly within your code base, or by just selecting something randomly within the code base. So this is the whole process. I won't discuss too much about it, but just for you to know, Pacmind is kind of a tech coach in the IDE. So it's an IDE extension. So you can go on the marketplace of NTDG, for example, and look for Pacmind, and you will find it. It's also a browser extension, which will be on top of GitLab, GitHub, Bitbucket, or Azure DevOps. And it will allow you to create best coding practices from a code review. The idea is to not repeat the same comments again and again and again when someone new joins the team. It's really to capitalize on your knowledge as a developer or a tech lead. And I will present after the process of practice review. That is the process used to validate those practices with your world team or with a community of practice. So I hope you can see the code. I think yes. So the idea of this plugin, of this Packmind extension, is that when you are coding something, we don't care about the legacy code. So it's not like Sonar Cube that will analyze your whole code base. The idea is much more to act as a coach on the new code that is created. So if I'm editing something in my code, and I see, for example, here that someone is using a for each loop and then extracting some arrays within the for each, I know with my technical skills that it could lead to performance issues if this array is huge. And right now, in this case with TypeScript, but it's the same with Java, you have a method called flatMap that you can use that is more performant to do that. So I can just select this piece of code, make a right click, and I have an option with Pacmind to identify a practice. So the idea here is that I can either identify an existing practice or just a new one that I will create, like this one that I'm doing. So I will create this practice, use flat map instead of for loop with array concatenation, and I will set this code example as a negative example. I can also identify good things within the code. For example, I add a try catch with some kind of logger, and I say, okay, this is a new logger that our team should use, so this is the good example of doing that. So in this case, it will be a negative example. I can also use the AI itself to suggest me new practices. If, I don't know, I'm a junior developer within this technology, or just I want some code improvement within the code that I've just added, with the Packmind, you can have automatic suggestion based on the model that you are using. So the AI part is not mandatory. We have a lot of clients not using AI, but if you use AI, it could be great to have some what we call self-review within your code. For example, here, I have this practice here saying that we should avoid direct state mutation in function, or this one, which is condense object mapping to enhance code efficiency, etc. In fact, it's not just documentation get from the code. We ask AI to generate the practices in the format that we use in Pacmind. So if I click on View Practice Details, for example, you will see that the practice has a name, a description, with always the same structure, what, why, and how to fix. And we ask AI also to add some external links to reference this practice. For example, here in the spread syntax. And you will have some proposition of correction and the examples that you had. So for you, this AI will try to suggest new practices for you. And if you think it could be interesting for your world team, you have this button to save this practice. So if you click on that, it won't be generally pushed to every developer. You need to validate those practices together during the practice review process. So you can do the same thing directly from GitLab or GitHub, etc. If, for example, you add a command to someone, like here, to say, okay, maybe you should extract a service up to manipulate dates and not just manipulate dates with Moment.js like this. You have this button, identify a practice, that lets you create a practice or a discussion topic or a question directly from this command. The idea is that during pull requests and code reviews, often you will just repeat the same thing and you will push this command to one developer only. The idea is to share this feedback to the whole team or to a whole community of practice. So once every 2 weeks or once per month, with a community of practice or with your team, you can gather onto Packmind, someone will share its screen, and for example here, I will start the practice review. So the idea is to go through everything that have been identified by everyone. We have 80% of the practices created by technical leaders or architects, but everyone can contribute. So you can be a junior developer, but you can have learned something, I don't know where, maybe in this conference, and you can propose a practice to the whole team. So the idea, instead of the configuration with SonarCube, which is mainly hosted by some people within the company, is that everyone can contribute and change those practices. So for example, here, you have the practices that we created together. Use flat map instead of for loop with array concatenation. So you can see that the practice has already a description. So I didn't add the description myself because I'm lazy, so I just create the practice with its name. And based on the name of the practice and the code example that we identify, we ask AI to generate a description for us. So it can be edited, and if I add it one myself, it won't be generated. But the idea is really to gain time to the team by generating this description. And if we validate this practice together, if we don't agree also, you can launch a battle with your other developer or the architect, for example, and then you can add some arguments against or for this practice, etc. It could be used really if there is some real difference between different ways to doing things, like for Longbook or a lot of things like this. So you can vote like this and make it democratic or not, if you are an architect, for example. And the idea is that when I validate this practice, we ask an AI agent to generate what we call guidelines for the automatic detection. So this AI agent will generate those guidelines to explain to itself how it should detect the practice. So you can edit those guidelines, but still they are looking pretty good almost every time. And if you read it, don't read it at once, but it will search for loops or for each, etc. And it will search if there is a concatenation within this for loop. So it creates a compliant example and a no-compliant example. So you can just look at it. And then we use those AI agents to try to generate a program that will be able to detect automatically those practices. So in fact, we have multiple AI agents, one that will generate a program, one that will debug and ask, add a console log here, add new things here, etc. I see that you don't go into that loop, so maybe there is an issue here, etc. So after some iteration, it could last between 10 seconds to 3 or 5 minutes, but it's run in the background. You will have a program, and we ask the AI to explain the program here. It's just for you to understand what is doing this program, but you won't have to read it. But you can see here that this program is looking for statements, for in, while, do while, etc. So the AI itself, from just the name of the practice and the description, we try to look for every cases where this practice should be detected. And once this practice is validated, if I'm, I don't know, a new developer in the team or just someone adding some code, this practice will pop in my IDE, like SonarLint, for example, but it's really based on my practices. And what is good is that this practice will be detected, but I have this button, suggest a fix, that will propose to me a fix based on the refactoring that I have already done. So the idea is that if you have your specific ways to do one thing, maybe you have a custom logger or a custom error handling system, etc. This AI will use your way of doing things to suggest code that match exactly your practices. So in this case, you can just say, okay, I will replace this code, etc. And so the idea of this is really to spread the knowledge of everyone within your company that have some specific knowledge about a lot of different things, about Spring, about Kafka, etc., and spread them efficiently across the organization. So if I stop here, it's working really for the people. But what is important is that if you are using, for example, GitHub Copilot or some AI tool, you can use every practices that you have. Let's say you have 100 practices about Spring, about Java, etc. You can push them to GitHub Copilot so that GitHub Copilot will use them to generate code that match every practices that you pushed. And it's working really well, even if you have 100 practices about security, performance, etc. For example, here, in my example, I ask Copilot to generate a test case in Java, and Copilot is just creating some basic test case with a new product, laptop, etc. But in our context, we use test builder now to generate tests because it's really, really more easy to understand, to learn, etc. So if I had my Pacmind practices, so in fact, you can generate every practice you have and push them to a Copilot. If I ask him exactly the same thing, like create a test, etc., it will now use my practices and use a test builder, make everything that I've already done in my project. But the real idea is that we don't want AI to infer practices from my project. You don't want it to just pick randomly one way of doing things and apply it everywhere. You need to be really explicit about what you want and what you don't want in the code. Otherwise, you will have some heterogeneous code or just homogeneous code but bad practices. So you can lose a lot of time in code reviews, etc. So the idea is to be sure that you have engineering practices that need to be followed by everyone and by the AI to have some good results. So I end my talk with the same slide as Liz yesterday. It wasn't made like this. So the idea of this slide is to pick a quote from Ken Beck, and I think it's really important to understand what he is trying to say here. He said that he has been reluctant to try ChatGPT, etc. And what he learned is that 80% of its skills now drop to $0. So AI can now replace a lot of things, repetitive things that you are doing. So maybe write a lot of test case, etc. So AI can do that. But the 10 remaining percent, which are really the knowledge of Ken Beck, the expertise that he has with every experience that he built, this has been now speed up to 1,000%. Why? Because now with AI, he is able to spread this knowledge and spread the best practices that he learned to many more developers than before. Because before he was obligated to explain this to every developer, etc. And now the AI can be this role of pushing those practices across the organization. So I think there is a lot of ways of using AI right now in our day-to-day development, but the one about learning, about upskilling the team is really important, because you can see also some other studies that say that if you have a team that work on a project without AI, so just by looking into Google, and other one which is using GitHub Copilot or ChatGPT, 1 week or 2 weeks after the end of the project, maybe the team with the AI went faster, but 2 weeks after, if you ask questions about the developer using AI, they won't be able to answer you why these choices have been made, or what is this code doing exactly. And if you ask them to edit something, or if you had a bug somewhere, they will be obligated to use AI also, because they won't understand really what is going on. And the other team that went to Google to make a lot of search about the documentation, etc., will be easily editing the code and fixing those bugs. So it's really important to not use AI just as a code generator. It's really important to still understand what is going on. So what are the practices that you want to use within the project? What are the good practices, the bad practices, etc., about Java, about the new version of everything? And the AI can use it, can really help you to spread it easily. So thank you, everyone, to be here today. And if you have any question, I think we have some minutes left, but I'll be in the Pacmind stand. So if you have any question, I will be happy to answer it. I currently don't know if we have the time to answer question. I think it's hand in 7 minutes. So if someone has a question, feel free to ask it. And if not, have a good lunch if you don't have eaten right now. But see you. And if you want to talk to me, I will be at my stand. So thank you, everyone. Still again.
All systems are nominal. Initialize Genesis